Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus. That's the majority caucus in the Ohio Senate. Great to have on the program Ohio Senate President Rob McColley, Finance Chairman Senator Jerry Cirino. Busy week. The budget passed. It is now on to the governor. Here is the main release. Senate approves final budget reducing tax burden by $1 billion with flat tax and substantial property tax relief. Really something to be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that, our constituents have been asking for some time to have tax relief. It's something on our side of the aisle, at least, we've said, look, we want to continue our march that we've done over the last decade or so at eliminating brackets, getting closer to a flat tax, and then even closer to the elimination of an income tax. And then, of course, property taxes have become a kitchen table issue across the state of Ohio, and this is the most substantial property tax package for reform that we've had in probably decades, I'm guessing. So really good day for Ohioans.
I have to say the Senate was very innovative because there was no type of income tax cut from the governor's initial budget, and even the House budget that they rolled out. What do you think really made the difference? Because it doesn't just happen overnight that somebody necessarily has an idea, but there has to be some planning, because over the last decade, as you've heard us say on this program, we've gone from 9 tax brackets to the last budget down to 2, and now down to 1 flat income tax.
Well, as you know, we have been on a trajectory seriously for the last 8 to 10 years of lowering the brackets and lowering the rates. So it was a natural conclusion for us to get to the flat tax objective. The question was, when would we do it, and could we get it done? And we in the Senate were very, very firm on our belief that it is good for the Ohio economy, it's good for attracting businesses and population to Ohio, and we just would not let go of it. It was a top priority for us going into the budget discussion.
And isn't that really how you grow a budget? You don't grow a budget. I think there is a stark difference between our side of the aisle and the left side of the aisle about what the budget should look like as far as growth. The left likes to raise taxes. The left has consistently fought against repealing state income tax brackets over the years. But isn't the best way to grow a budget is by reducing the bureaucracy, the tax burden, and letting the economy then take off? And then you grow the budget by the tax revenue from a growing economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the entire time we've been cutting income taxes, dating back to, I think, Governor Kasich's first budget. As you mentioned, 9 brackets, well over 7% as the highest bracket, now down to current law at 2 brackets, 3.5% being the highest, will eventually be to 2.75 in 1 bracket by the end of the biennium. We have never lost personal income tax revenue over that time frame. Every single biennium, the revenue gets replaced and then some. And so this whole theory that, you're throwing money out the window, no, we're not doing that. We're actually creating more growth in the economy. People are spending that money. It's churning multiple times in the economy. More people are able to earn income off that money as it gets spent, and inevitably it's better for all of Ohioans.
Smaller government equals more growth. Do you agree with that? You're a longtime businessman.
I agree with that. Certainly, when you look at tax burdens and regulations and other impediments that governments often put in front of businesses making good decisions and doing the right thing. The other side of this is that, and I don't understand for the life of me, why the Democrats continue to vilify people who have been successful. After all, the billionaires and millionaires are the ones who create jobs. They're the ones who invest in our state. They're the ones who provide benefits to families around the state. And you would think that the Democrats just don't understand where all of the dollars that we do have to support infrastructure and to support people in need, whether it's children, elderly, education, et cetera. We're not going to be able to do that in the long run if we don't have a strong, consistent, vibrant, growing economy in the state of Ohio.
It's always interesting when you think about a working couple, a mom and dad here in Ohio, who maybe she makes $60,000 a year, he makes $40,000 a year for a total of $100,000, yet you would think that the Democrats would label them as rich. That I heard them on the floor today say, well, wealthy people don't need a $10,000 tax deduction or tax refund. I thought that was pretty nervy to say, actually, for them to label who is rich and who isn't in Ohio.
Well, it's the same tired old talking point that they've used every time they want to vote against a budget. The truth of the matter is they've voted for plenty of tax cuts for people at the top end of the income chain. They've voted for plenty of elimination of top tax brackets over the last several years when we've had unanimous budgets that's passed out of both chambers. But they have to go deep into their bucket of talking points to try and dig that one out, tax cuts for the rich. But you are absolutely right. Somebody making $100,000 a year, or a family making $100,000 a year or more, in this economy, after the inflation that we've had and things of that nature, it's not as much as it used to be. It's a good living, it's a good income. In a lot of parts of the state, you can live a good life on that, but it certainly doesn't mean that you're rich. And I think that's the disconnect that was demonstrated on the part of the Democrats today.
Did the budget maintain the current law where anyone making $26,050 or less pays zero state income tax?
That is absolutely true. Everybody making $26,000 or $50,000 or less will not pay any income tax. That's not changing.
That's also an important point. You would agree with that?
Yeah, of course. And that when we were planning the package and the process, at no time did we ever consider, trying to lower that in any way. We simply felt that was a given as we were making the plans for announcing and structuring the way the flat tax would be coming out.
So the 2-year budget, the top rate drops in the first fiscal year from 3.5 to 3.125, and then the second fiscal year is when we phase in the 2.75% flat tax, correct?
That is correct.
All right, let's move on to property tax reform. Because of all the emails that we received from this show, there was an insistence from our viewers about what are you going to do about property tax reform, and there is substantial property tax reform in this. Take us through it step by step.
Yeah, so for years, let's start with the basis of this. The state does not levy property taxes, okay? That's all local governments that levy property taxes. The state does not set your property tax rate by and large. It's local governments that do. 70% of the property tax you pay, more or less, depending on where you live, goes to your local school district. So that's a very baseline piece of this. When it was begun, the property tax system in Ohio, it was meant to be largely anti-inflationary, meaning you would get a modest inflation on certain amounts of money that were collected, but for the most part, the voters had to approve if you were going to go above that amount. And it would be a fixed sum over the course of time, and meaning you would only collect a certain dollar amount, and if you wanted more money, you had to go back to the voters, okay? We've gotten so far away from that, and some of the things we did in this budget have begun to return it back to. You're going to get largely a fixed sum if you're over a certain amount of money. The voters are going to have to approve if you go above that amount. And so it's really being responsive to what we're hearing from voters across the state. This will impact probably 2/3 of school districts across the state of Ohio that will now not get automatic unvoted inflationary spikes anymore because they're not on the 20 mil floor that we've talked about on this program in the past. And those that are quote unquote on the floor, not truly on the floor, but are double dipping and getting that inflationary increase as if they are on the floor, that will be outlawed going forward. They will be treated that they are not on the floor as they should not be treated that they are on the floor.
Something I think that is really important because a lot of voters will see the ad or the story in the newspaper and it'll talk about this district wants an emergency levy. This district wants a replacement levy instead of a renewal levy. Well, this budget abolishes going forward any new emergency or replacement levies.
That's correct. One of the things that we like about our property tax plan is it also enhances transparency. Voters simply don't understand generally, and that's understandable to me because the way these things are positioned and defined, it really confuses voters. And so we like the additional transparency that this is going to require. But again, as the president was saying, we don't levy property taxes, and yet a lot of the local officials have been sending their constituents to their state reps or state senators asking us to solve the property tax problem, when in point of fact, the taxes are being levied locally, not just the schools, that's the largest part of it, but there are other levies that are used that are funded by property taxes. And we are now with the Budget Commission empowerment, and in some cases the county commissioners, the decision-making is local. If they want to lower property taxes, they can do it.
Through the Budget Commission.
The Budget Commission, and in some cases through the county commissioners as well.
And what is the Budget Commission? Who makes up the Budget Commission? And so they have the power to oversee and reduce the amount of money coming in, or reducing the amount of millage.
In this bill, the Budget Commission, which already exists, is comprised of 3 elected officials: the prosecutor, the auditor, and the treasurer of the county. And under our bill, we've empowered them even further to be able to challenge and make decisions, and to call out and require reductions if the parameters that we have outlined in the bill are not met.
When we talk about most of the levy revenue going to 70%, basically 70% of it going across the state to the school districts, it was really shocking and eye-opening that in the last year that Ohio's 611 school systems had a collective cash carryover balance of $10.5 billion. That, I think, took a lot of people's breath away when you look at the 5-year forecast. And you can find that on the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce website. Just type in 5-year forecasts and you can find it. And there it is for like the next 5 years, and look at the ending cash balance of your school district. So this is something that was addressed by this budget.
Let's put that in perspective for a second, what $10.5 billion means. $10.5 billion is about how much money the state collects in personal income tax every year. And that much money is sitting in these schools' accounts collectively throughout the state of Ohio. So for the entire state, all the taxpayers, we're a state of almost 12 million people, and $10.5 billion of income tax paid, the same amount of money is sitting in their accounts. As we mentioned, 70% of your property taxes goes to school districts. The question needs to be asked, when 70% of the property tax revenue is going to school districts, and we're seeing property taxes go through the roof in some of these districts, the question needs to be asked, what can the school districts do to help alleviate this problem, especially when they're carrying over 70, 80, 90, sometimes well over 100% of their annual expenditures year to year in an account. That's something that I think needed to have some sunlight shed on it. That's something that we needed to bring to the attention of the voters, and that's a problem that we needed to empower our local officials, just as Jerry described, to address.
It's interesting to hear some of the school districts complain about then the school funding formula moving forward about we don't have enough money. Well, you've been in the so-called fair school funding plan now for going on the 5th year of that, with an additional investment in this budget of $1 billion. So over the last 2 budgets, it's been more than an additional $3 billion invested in K through 12. What's your message about school funding and what the state of Ohio, the General Assembly, is putting into our K through 12 public schools?
The facts speak for themselves. So when a school district goes out and tries to tell its voters that we're being underfunded, we simply don't have enough money, that is just simply not the case. Okay, when you look at the funding plan that was passed, over the past 3 budgets, we've put an additional over $4.5 billion into public schools alone. $4.5 billion. That's over a 26% increase just into public schools alone over a short 4-year time frame. 6 years by the end of this budget time frame, that they've received an extra dollars, okay? All while they're carrying over large carryover balances. When they try to say that these cuts that they might be getting based on the formula that they approved, that these cuts that some districts might be getting will have them close their doors. Look at the total revenue. We've looked at it, that weighed into our discussion. You'd be hard-pressed to find any district that is going to see their overall revenues go down by more than 2%. And any business owner, Jerry's run plenty of businesses in his life, any business owner or anybody who's had to manage a budget will tell you 2% is not a disaster. You don't want to do it in some cases, but 2%, you need to tighten your belt a little bit and you'll get through it just fine.
And every district no district receives less than what it did in FY21.
That's correct.
That's
correct.
That's an important thing. And
Yeah.
here's a couple other statistics. 77% of the districts will receive an increase over what they received in FY25, in other words, last year. In the first year of the budget, 75% of the districts will receive an increase in the second year compared to FY25. Plus, there is also a performance incentive that results matter for districts.
It does, and we were insistent in our discussions and negotiations with the House and with some outside parties who were chiming in on the issue that we do have this performance component. We ended up, through negotiations, moving it outside of the base formula, but it's still in the calculation in terms of what school systems can get if they have shown progress in performance, and also a factor for changes in enrollment up or down. Those are things that need to be part of the equation of deciding how the funding should be going to these school systems.
You know, one thing I think is the gem, one of the most unique parts of the budget that really got the media's attention was the Senate's initiative and strategy of how to fund the Brook Park Economic Development Project. And you really had a great strategy, and take us through that, because the original proposal from the governor's office was to raise taxes, I think, on gambling revenue. And then the state House thought it would be a good idea to roll out bonds to help fund their project in Brook Park and to move the Cleveland Browns Stadium with a brand new dome stadium to Brook Park. And then the really innovative funding strategy of using unclaimed funds that have been sitting there for decades. How did that all come about?
Well, I think, first of all, you look at all three, the governor, the House, and the Senate, we all agreed that it was a good mixed-use sports-related project in the first place. It's good for Cleveland. I'm from Cleveland. I know the area very well. I think it's going to be fantastic. So that was our starting point. We all thought the project was worthy. The question then became, what's the best way to finance it? The governor wanted to raise taxes. We don't really like that. The House was going to do it with bonds, floating bonds over 25 years that would have cost the state, out of our general fund, $400 million in debt service, okay? That is unproductive money. It's obviously negative to our budget. We didn't like that idea from the get-go, and so we went in search of a different way to do it with cash. The question was, where's this cash going to come from? We didn't have $600 million sitting around idly, except in the unclaimed funds. And we did a lot of work with lawyers and discussing amongst ourselves, how could we do that? What's the right way to do it? Because of the concept of escheatment, which is not familiar to most people. But we came up with a way to do that protects Ohio taxpayers. It protects people who have unclaimed funds, sometimes that they don't even know about. And it shielded us from spending $400 million to pay an interest to bondholders.
And that's your tax money. That would be money coming from the general revenue fund, which is directly your tax dollars.
That is correct. That is correct.
So you're really protecting the state's tax money, right? And you're also protecting really the state's credit rating, are you not?
That's correct, because if should something ever go wrong or payments be made late, whatever, it could impact the AAA rating that we have in the state, which none of us would ever do anything to put that in jeopardy.
And unclaimed funds are not tax dollars. They're unclaimed funds. And these funds have been sitting there for how long?
They could sometimes for a very, very long time. And they're money that is transferred to the state from insurance companies, banks, credit card companies, et cetera, that have been unclaimed. They have attempted in many cases to find who the rightful owners are. When they exhaust all their possibilities, they turn it over to the state, to the Commerce Department, and it sits then in our plan. It will sit there for 10 years before it would be escheated or turned over to the state.
can people still get their money? Because that's been the big knock for a while, about, well, you're taking people's money away. Well, it's been sitting there for decades, if not at least 10 years. So what's the message to the general public that if you think you have a claim on unclaimed funds, of which there is how much in the unclaimed funds?
$4.8 billion as of last week sitting in unclaimed funds, with probably close to 250 to 300 million a year that is new coming into the unclaimed funds. So there is no danger for anybody to make a claim and then the state not have the cash to be able to make good on the claim.
So people can also make a claim moving forward for at least another 10 years. Is that right, Mr. President?
That is correct. They will be able to make a claim for another 10 years. So even if you had money that was over 10 years old and then will be cheated to the state in this version of the bill, you still have 10 years to come back and get your money, and there will be money available for you to be paid your money that was in the unclaimed fund. So no risk of anybody at this point, at least for 10 years, regardless of how long it's been sitting in the account, of losing your opportunity to come claim that money.
And I would add that the Commerce Department does a lot of work to try to find claimants, okay? We've actually, in this budget, added another $2 million in the Commerce Department's budget to be able to redouble their efforts to go find the rightful owners of these unclaimed funds.
So this money that would go to the Brook Park Economic Development Project, i.e. the Browns Stadium, and it would be the only dome stadium in Ohio.
Correct.
Is that right? How does this work? It's not a loan. It's not a bond. It's a performance grant. And then is there a measurement of, is it working? Is the state seeing revenue from this project?
We have agreed with the Browns on a schedule that goes for 16 years. And we will measure the incremental taxes, income tax, sales tax, commercial activity tax that will come from the project that we can easily define and identify. And we believe that in 16 years, in the plan that we have, that we will get the money, the $600 million plus an inflator, probably close to $630 million in total in 16 years that we will get back. And then we will have, and our arrangement will be concluded, but we will continue to get those incremental taxes in perpetuity.
And the Browns have to put up, what, $100 million based on the every 4-year evaluation of how the progress of the project is going.
Exactly, and it acts in many ways as a guarantee to the state that they'll make up the shortfall of revenue. So $100 million, the first true up after 4 years isn't even $100 million. The second true up is a little bit over that, and then the true ups get larger as it goes on. I think it's highly unlikely, if statistically nearly impossible, with that $100 guarantee left there, or $100 million guarantee, that the state will not receive its money back. I think in the long run, if you run the numbers, it's more likely that the state is going to see a return on this investment.
And this is not a one and done kind of a program, correct? This is something that's set up for the potential for other projects on down the road. How does that work?
Well, the project scope that we're looking at with the Browns may be one of the only ones we get that's that comprehensive.
Right.
It's a completely new dome stadium, and it's transformational mixed use on top of that as well. But we know that we have other sports teams and cultural activities in the state, and we are going to be using unclaimed funds over a period of time in a manner that we've outlined in the bill to be able to support some of those. But the parameters will all be different because the projects are going to all be different.
Evaluated on their own merit.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the process we've set up going forward is recognizing that these projects are expensive. We would prefer not to pay for it out of the tax revenues of the state of Ohio for a variety of reasons, and this gives us an opportunity to do it. But it should be noted as well, also eligible in this is cultural facilities. So if you're a museum, if you're a concert hall, if you're a variety of things that's not a stadium, they will be eligible as well to collect from these funds and to be able to fund their renovations or construction.
You know, when you have a lot of economic development and investment coming into Ohio, Well, people have to have a place to live, and a lot of people like to move into a place like Ohio from the coast because, wow, the cost of living is so much less, and you can have so much more property or house or whatever it is, more discretionary income to live your life. But housing has to be there. How did the Senate and this budget overall address housing?
Two issues primarily, two programs. One is a rural development revolving loan fund program to say that if there is a county out there that's fewer than 75,000 people and has had less than the statewide average of new home building permits for single-family homes over the last year, they'll be eligible to pull down, the local government will be able to pull down money out of this revolving loan fund, a loan, to be able to help with infrastructure costs and building out subdivisions, roads, sewer systems, et cetera, to try and take that cost off the plate to a developer who may not otherwise look at that community because that cost might be too much to bear for them to be able to make a profit developing homes there. I come from one of these districts where it's been very difficult for developers to come out there and be able to even break even building new homes in a subdivision. This will enable the local governments to take an active role in that, take on that cost, and then allow for these developers to come out there and hopefully start building again in rural Ohio.
Yeah, $100 million directed into that revolving loan fund you talked about to basically do site prep in rural Ohio because of the topography and geography, and it's just difficult to prepare the property for construction. Then the residential economic development districts, $25 million for that. For rapidly growing areas where you have some of these mega projects coming in.
Yep, that's something that Senator Reynolds put a lot of work into. She put a lot of work into both of these things, but this in particular, this RED, as you said, the Residential Economic Development District, looking at the areas where we've had large mega projects, I believe $750 million and above as it's defined in her language, and basically saying we are going to give grants to local governments to help them redo their zoning code, to help them begin to plan for this investment, to really try to make it more expedient and more efficient to build large-scale home development near these major economic development projects.
Also making a significant investment in families here in Ohio. A couple weeks ago, or was it last week actually, we had national leaders come in. The former Speaker of the House, Chris Sproles in Florida, former NFL Viking as well came in, who is part of the America First program, and a co-captain from the Ohio State Buckeyes, Cameron Babb. Senator Reynolds was part of it. But it's about a $20 million investment into the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood. Why was that so important for you?
When you look at all of the different things that we fund in our budget, whether it be Medicaid, other welfare programs, even public education, and you look at where some of these expenses started going up, there's a pretty strong correlation that many of these expenses starting going up, and even mental health issues among kids and things of that nature, and incarceration rates, et cetera, many of these things started going up when we saw fathers leaving the home, when we saw parents not raising children together, when we saw really fathers sometimes walking away from their children for one reason or another. This is aimed at trying to develop programs that will get fathers reintroduced into their kids' lives. You don't have to be a perfect father, you just have to be a present father. And I think all of the research suggests that if you can be present, if you can be part of your children's lives, the odds that they're going to have mental health issues go down, their school performance is going to be better, the odds that they get incarcerated go down, the odds that they are going to graduate high school increases. So all of these different things that we see as indicators that they're going to have problems down the line begin to be addressed if they can grow up with a solid father figure in their life.
I always have to admire Senator Cirino's large family. It matters, doesn't it? Having a strong male role model at the house.
Well, it does, and I've certainly tried to be that, and I've tried my three sons and my sons-in-law do their best, and we try to work together. But, there's no question, especially in the African-American community, it's a huge problem. It really is. And, we could continue to grow the benefits and dealing with incarcerations and dealing with all of the results of loss of a nuclear family, or we can, and we still have to do some of those things, but let's get at the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is clearly that the nuclear family has been allowed to degrade over the last number of years. And until we start addressing that, and the Fatherhood Initiative is one way to do that, we're not going to really solve the problem. We're going to continue to be dealing with the problems at the back end.
Yeah, I love what people said at the news conference. Jack Brewer, Senator Reynolds as well, talked about it's about teaching fathers who didn't have a father how to be a father. So it's a significant investment. I can't let either of you go without talking about really the effort to reform higher education in Ohio. Not only was Senate Bill 1 that passed and is now law as part of this General Assembly, but there was a significant investment made in academic freedom at the 5 centers of civics and government here in Ohio, and I know that was both near and dear to both of you.
Yeah, exactly. When we look at these centers that we set up, we've covered them extensively. What it really was supposed to be put in kind of with a barrier and a buffer between the rest of the administration of the university, so they could get back to being centers of open dialogue and debate and discussion as college is supposed to be, without the influence of what we know statistically has been a far left-leaning college environment, primarily because the faculty have moved probably 20 or 30 points to the left in a percentage basis over the last 20 years. It's meant to be that. And the interesting thing is, when we put this in, there was a college or two that was pretty accepting of it, and then there were some others that were a little bit more reluctant. I think Chairman Cirino would tell you, now we have universities coming to us asking if they can form one on their own campus. And I think it's because they realize this isn't the boogeyman that people said it was going to be. It's actually, in some cases, not only a good tool for campus to build the culture of your campus around, but it's also an attraction tool for you to try and bring students in.
I actually had a comment from a reporter, actually it was not last night, it was this morning after our conference, that said that they had talked with a professor at a university in Ohio, and that professor disavowed the fact that there is any left-leaning aspect to our universities in Ohio. So, and I don't know what rock that professor is living under, but they're definitely in denial. It is clearly leaning left and has been for decades. The challenge for us, and I think the reason why so many viewed the 5 centers negatively at first, was because they thought we were trying to move the pendulum from far left to far right. Where we want to be is neutral. That's what higher education should be. It should be about neutral, not moving in any single direction in a monolithic fashion, because that sells the students short for the diversity of thought that they should be exposed to.
Yeah, watch our recent President's Podcast with Senator Cirino and the 2 professors from Ohio State, one from the Salmon Chase Center, which was one of the civic centers. And they'll tell you, yeah, this is a needed and necessary program because the faculty and what's been happening on college campuses has lurched far to the left. $34 million for Wright State, Miami University of Ohio, Ohio State, Cleveland State, and the University of Toledo. As I wrap up, you don't just put a budget together overnight. This is a 2-year budget. It's called the Biennial Budget in the state of Ohio. As the 136th General Assembly kicked off with the leadership of a new Senate President, with President McColley, Finance Chair Senator Cirino, the start of every new GA, the odd year, is a big budget year. How did the plan come together? And how do you decide what the big ticket items are going to be? The tax policy, whether it's Senate Bill 1, there's been a lot of things that have been accomplished. Maybe take us through that.
Well, I think it started at our retreat early I believe it was early in February, because it was very cold. And President McColley, to start things off, kind of set the stage and the parameters for what the initiatives and priorities were going to be for the beginning part of the General Assembly. And we talked about it, we discussed it, we delved into it quite a bit, and we left the retreat knowing what our priorities were in education and energy for the budget that was going to be coming up. And so you start with a sort of a 30,000-foot view of aspirations, and then you begin to work down to how that's going to be actually become law, and what are the issues we're going to have to deal with in order to get there. I think we had an excellent plan, and the president showed great leadership in helping us understand the priorities and helping us get there, with all of the various pieces and parts that have to come together to get a bill passed into law.
There's been a lot of big bills. I mean, big accomplishments, not only the higher education bill, education rather than indoctrination, Senate Bill 2, the modern 21st century energy policy that focuses on more capacity, natural gas generation, Ohio being an exporter of energy. Senator Chavez talked about Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, put them all together, the third largest natural gas producer in the world. What has made the difference as we sit here after the budget has been passed? What do you think has made all of this happen from your perspective as the Senate president?
I believe it's a good team, and it's a good group of people who are buying into the vision that we have a lot more work left to do, even though we're happy that we've gone from 9 income tax brackets now down to 1 income tax bracket, and we've cut that tax line, and we're seeing economic growth as a result. We're seeing new companies coming in. Even though we've done an awful lot, I don't think anybody is pleased with just staying in neutral. We have a long way to go. We have great competitive advantages in this state that are underutilized, such as our natural gas, such as our availability of water, such as the fact that we have a number of higher education institutions in this state, much higher relative to other states. We have the ability at this point to really put the gas pedal down to the floor and accelerate our growth even further. And I think everybody in the caucus understands that and saw it as a priority, that we don't just go in here and just kind of putz along a little bit. We need to lead boldly. We need to pass some high priority major legislation that's not going to be easy work, and we need to do it quickly. And I'm surprised, I shouldn't say surprised, I'm very satisfied that we've been able to do it in the first 6 months.
And you have to get it through both chambers. Final thought. There was a conference committee. The conference committee is made up of 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and they have to work through all the differences between the House and the Senate passed versions of the budget. What was the working relationship with the House?
Well, the working relationship in the conference, which was myself and the chair of finance in the House, and Brian Stewart, and we had a very, very positive relationship. Yes, we disagreed on a number of things. We had over 800 points of disagreement as we compared our 2 budgets. And our task was, in a very short period of time, to reconcile as many of those as we could. The discussions, and they were intense, and they were 12, 14, 16-hour days over the weekend and so on. But we knew what we had to get done, and I think we narrowed the issues down in the first couple of days. And we knew we were running out of time, and we had to complete the job and narrow everything else down. We had great policy discussions and sort of mini debates, but the relationship was respectful. We were able to disagree, and nobody got angry at one another. Nobody stormed out of the meetings. None of that stuff. I know I've been asked a couple times by some of the media who have expressed, hey, it must have been really tough. Were you guys fighting with each other and yelling and screaming? There was none of that. It was all very professional, and Chairman Stewart and I got along very well. It was great to work with the House.
I said at the end of the 135th General Assembly on this program that when the outgoing Senate President, who is now the current Speaker, Matt Huffman, and then you would have Senate President Rob McColley, I told some media, some of the reporters that cover the State House, that I think you're going to see one of the most efficient and effective General Assemblies in years. Has that made a difference to have someone in leadership in the other chamber that you have not only a good working relationship with, but you can trust what they have to say?
I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to be able to have trust between the chambers. You have to be able to know that the other person is working in good faith. You may have differences between your caucuses. You may have different priorities, but knowing that you can have an open dialogue and lay your cards on the table and know that you're going to be able to move forward in a good faith way, that's so important. in any relationship that you have, but particularly when you have two chambers who have to work together by design, and have to do so to be able to get the business of the state done. Having somebody that you know you can pick up the phone, have an open conversation with, they're not going to use the information you share with them to your detriment and vice versa. That's incredibly important. It's made my life pretty easy as a president relative to some people who've come before me. But hey, we'll take it. I'm happy to be working with now Speaker Huffman, and we still got a lot of more work to do over the next 18 months.
Senate President Rob McColley, Finance Chair Senator Jerry Cirino. Gentlemen, congratulations on a great budget, fiscally sound, lowering the tax burden across all levels in Ohio. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.